this day in history, in 1360, a hailstorm kills an estimated 1,000 English soldiers in Chartres, France. It became known as Black Monday. The storm played a part in the 100 Years' War between England and France, and more than 20 years earlier, King Edward III of England was trying to conquer France. He took a massive force across the English Channel to Calais and rampaged the countryside. Basically, they were outside of Paris in the suburbs, burning things down. While they were outside of Chartres, a sudden storm struck. Lightning killed several people. The hailstones began pelting the soldiers. Horses were neighing in fear and dying. Two of the English leaders were killed on that foul day full of mist and hail. And not surprisingly, a lot of people thought that was a sign from God. And King Edward negotiated peace, primarily that ended the first phase of the 100 Years' War. But as you know, France survived as a country to colonize parts of North America, and England to colonize most of the rest of it. And now we have two great friends, Wendy, our English speaker, and Annie, qui parle français. And we'll introduce Professor Traynor in English, but if the storm had gone differently, maybe we would all be bilingual instead. So I'll bring my friend Annie up to introduce Wendy Traynor.
Well, bonjour. I am very honored to present this spring faculty lecturer, Professor Wendy Traynor, as part of the Buechner Institute series. Professor Traynor is the daughter of a general in the U.S. Army. She is a graduate of North Georgia College, which I was told today it's now North Georgia University, where she met her beloved husband Brian, who is with us today. Hello, Brian. She loved the Army so much that she married an Army man. Brian and Wendy Traynor have a son, Kevin. As you may know, much to Professor Traynor's chagrin, Kevin left home this year to attend Presbyterian College. She gets sad when he leaves, but we think that she will be able to maybe recover eventually. I'm going to mention a few things about Professor Traynor you might know, you might not know. One very important fact, to me anyway, she dresses very fashionably. Not quite language department fashionably, but well, she still could be featured in Vogue for mathematicians. You may not realize that Professor Traynor is an avid collector. At home, she has a collection of dogs, and our office has our famous collections of cups and plates from the cafeteria. Yes, it's true. She is renowned for making math accessible to people who otherwise struggle with it. How good she is? Well, many students are not even aware that her class was about math. Of course, her favorite sport is outdoor statistics, which you may know and call baseball. You know Professor Traynor loves you when she gives you a nickname. Don't feel bad if she didn't give you one already. She will eventually. You will get one. Mine, of course, is what? Frenchie. When Professor Traynor helped me become a citizen of the United States, her main contribution to my understanding of America was to make me eat a corn dog. And she tried to make me eat the banana split, but that's where I draw the line. No, that's not happening. So although Professor Traynor has an awesome sense of humor. She is also a great listener and loves the beautiful order of haiku poems. She is a twittering expert. She loves bubblegum. She is truthfully helpful, giving, and funny. But above all, she is my best friend, and I don't know what would I do without her. Please welcome Professor Traynor.
I just have three things that I would like to discuss. I was preparing maybe to discuss a need for new friends, depending on how that went, but I'm quite pleased. So we don't need to do that. But if you are going to use social media, I've just given you some suggestions that I thought might be helpful. All of those are great. If you would be so kind and maybe not use I just help me out with that. For those who have not had me in class, you should probably be aware that I'm quite easily distracted. And so if there are awkward pauses, it's probably because there was a bug or somebody in back did something weird on purpose. I'm not aldermaning, right? I'm not trying it out. I'm just probably distracted. And I'll go on tangents. And just stay with me through it. I will get back on track. And we will get through. Lastly, I just want to make sure that might happen and it's going to be weird and awkward. One thing that people do not know is that I cry a lot, and there are obvious things that I cry at that everybody cries at. The end of the movie Rudy, I mean, you're just dead inside. That doesn't make you cry. There's a scene in Dumbo. I can't talk. The Cats in the Cradle song. If you don't know it, well, it will make you cry as well. And then those ASPCA commercials, you know what I'm talking about? I have to change the channel. But these are non-obvious things that I also cry through. This is why it might be a problem. I have cried at episodes of The Simpsons, Folgers commercials, when it comes home. I cried at opening convocation this year. I mean, just cried. Part of it might be because I had to sit next to Dan Christ. Okay, so it may be awkward and I might cry because I also cry if I get personal or nervous or anything else like that. We're mad. Not that I expect to get angry at this, but we're gonna muscle through it if it happens, and we're gonna move on. Okay, and now. So I knew as soon as I heard that I was chosen to do this lecture that I wanted to do my talk on the subject of roots. It's a perfect subject because there's so many meanings, and all the meanings are very personal to me and very significant to me. My picture on that poster is very significant for meaning number one, which when I arrived here 9 years ago was not something important to me, but it's important now. Because if you look closely at that picture, there's a good half-inch of gray hair that, there's a root problem that I think King has caused in some part. Sometimes I name students after them. Sometimes I name other people. But anyway, that's become a part of my life, and so this is a reality that I now have to deal with. And it reminds me that I'm 45. I'm not 25, which I feel like I am half the time. And that's not that looks like a cheap joke setup for this speech, but that really was an actual picture I took. Because I was late for dinner, and my friends were already there, and I was pouting because that took forever. Right? Anyway. Some of you might have seen the title of the talk, The Value of Roots, and you might have thought that you were in for a math lecture. Part of that was maybe to keep enrollment a little bit down, or attendance a little bit. But obviously, roots in all of their mathematical forms are important to me personally. I've spent a lot of my life teaching people how to calculate them or evaluate them. But that has nothing to do with my talk today. Type number 3 is something that is very significant to me, and that's what I would consider geographic roots. And the reason is because what I have up there are all the places that I have called home for a certain amount of time. And they're everywhere, obviously mostly the Southeast, but there are 18 of them. And I'm 45, and there are 18 of them. So that's an average, which you don't have to get out the calculators, I'll let you know. I know that's probably what you were curious about. So that's 2.5 years each is my average. Luckily, I've been in Bristol almost 10 years, so that is my longest by far. But my father was in the United States Army for 32 years, and that was our life. That's how I grew up. I grew up moving every couple of years from Army post to Army post. And so I was always fascinated by people who had what I consider geographic roots, that were able to have a group of friends that they were raised with. And it was something that I wanted until I really understood what roots mean, what geographical roots mean. And those of you who are here now, this is now your geographic home. Some of you are from far away, some of you didn't come from that far. But you know, just like anybody, that you bring all those places with you. And you bring those experiences with you. And uprooting, like people sometimes refer to moving, is not necessarily a negative thing. Uprooting is the way people would talk about Army kids. In fact, sometimes they still do. Sometimes people would say, well, as soon as I had kids, I got out of the Army or the military because I didn't want to uproot my family. Which is kind of weird that you would say that to a family that has been doing this. But I think people have the idea of being ripped from a core and set somewhere. And you may think that way. Maybe you have opportunities elsewhere that you don't want to take because you think that that is going to destroy what you are at the core. But I would challenge you to think differently if that's the way you think. You're going to carry your home with you no matter where you are, and you'll bring your influence to other people. International students in class. They have street cred from the time they walk in. You know it and I know it. When you're calling roll and Lizzie Swallow says present, and everybody turns around and they're fascinated by that because they know she has geographic roots that are different from theirs. Matthew Lychik is from Las Vegas, and they call him Vegas. Like, that's his name, because that's his geographic roots, and that's where he's from, and he can bring those value. So, my challenge to you is type number 3 of roots is to get out and explore, and don't be afraid to move somewhere else and think that your family and your friends and everything will be lost, because they won't. So normally I don't quote Buechner. Normally I quote Judge Smales from Caddyshack or things like that. But I felt a responsibility giving a part of the Buechner lecture to have a quote. And I think, not that he called it a quote on geographic roots, but I think this quote sort of sums up that idea. You can kiss your family and friends goodbye and put miles between you, but at the same time you carry them with you in your heart and in your mind and your stomach, because you do not just live in a world, but a world lives in you. And that's how I feel about geographic roots. Type number 4, other than geographic, would be what people call the core of somebody, your inner root system. What were you born with? And I discovered that when I was cleaning recently, which is funny in itself, really. When I found this, and that's 5-year-old me, and my fashion sense clearly was just intact then. I wish you could see that because it was a full jumpsuit. It was an ABC 123 full jumpsuit with rickrack trim. If you're under the age of, I don't know where the cutoff is, probably if you're under the age of 35, you don't know what rickrack. Any of you never heard of rickrack? No, it's okay. Okay, so rickrack was like a zigzag trim, like a ribbon, that everybody's mom would sew on everything that they made. And if you're under the age of 25, moms used to sew. They used to make their own clothes from a pattern. Anyway, this was a Dr. Seuss book called My Book About Me. And so what it was is it was a way for kids to kind of write about themselves. And there were things, fill in the blank things that kids would fill out about themselves, like how tall they were, how old they were when their birthday was. And then there are some checkmark things, what type of house do you live in, and you make a checkmark. You can trace your foot and your hand. Definitely both are still the same as they were back then. But I found out from that 5-year-old me and 45-year-old me are very similar. In fact, I could probably hang out with 5-year-old me and we would have a good time. And part of that is because that's who I am at my roots and that's who I am at my core. And so first thing is, you may not be able to tell what's going on here, but I know what's going on. And it's the fact that I felt the need to define every variable. And those boxes and empty spaces were not waiting for a check mark from me, they were waiting for me to write in an answer because I wanted to evaluate what was in the space. And so you can't see it at the top, but this is like normally you're supposed to check which one you are, but I wanted to fill in, so I wear glasses, I wrote no. I don't wear glasses, I wrote yes, because I felt like everything needed an answer, and then just to cover my bases, I didn't know what was happening, he didn't have eyes, so I thought that was another space, a place where I had to define. So I think even back then, I was wanting to define and evaluate variables. There's another example of this. I like reading the worst. Yes. Okay, yes, I'm a professor and I don't like to read. And I never like to read, and that's part of my core. And that's horrifying to most people in here. And some of you may think, my gosh, her parents must be so ashamed. They must have done a terrible job. My mom is an avid reader. She loves to read. We grew up reading books. It just wasn't my thing, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't say I like math best, so I cut that part out of the picture, but I thought I would explain. It actually says spelling, which is who likes spelling? So I cut that out, but here's me filling in the gaps. I'm a good student, yes. I'm a so-so student, also yes, sometimes. I am awful, I wrote art. And those of you who have had me for pre-cal and calculus are sadly aware of that when I draw the little figures and the trajectories and all that other stuff. Because I've always been that, so that I learned about myself. I just thought this was funny in that when it said, what's your favorite book? I said this one, my book about me. And I think I probably would say the same now. So I just thought that was funny. This one said, if you really want to get me a birthday present, and then I said a dolly. I really am horrified that I said dolly instead of doll. A big dolly though, spelled wrong. My favorite subject was spelling. But how I know that part of it is the core is the persistence that 5-year-old me said, because under it, Dr. Seuss, or whoever actually wrote the text, said, but if it's too expensive, forget it. And I said, no, don't forget. And that's a persistence that I would like to hold on to and say is a part of me. This is a slide, I think I still sometimes suffer from this, the choice of being honest or saying what you think you should say. And so I filled this out honestly. It was a thing that was like, hey, have you ever been mad at somebody? What have you done? And so I pushed someone, yes. I hit someone, yes. I was not a hair yanker, obviously, so I said no, I didn't pull hair. Were you sorry? No. 2 pages later, there's a place in that book where you had to get autographs from adults. And I'm guessing what happened is the adults started flipping through the book, and then you go, uh-oh. So I changed all my answers. You can see scratching out, like nobody's going to know that that's what you initially did. And I think 45-year-old Wendy might have done this on some faculty evaluations, some self-evaluation. I'm not confirming or denying that, but part of that sticks with me. Look at that, right? Even back then, my favorite sport, I said, was fishing that I participated in, because I didn't participate in anything else, but I loved fishing back then. And maybe that's because I was taking fishing, but I think it has more to do with who I am as a core and what I like to do and what makes me have peace. Because my brother and I were both taking fishing, and he doesn't really care for it like I do. But I thought that was so interesting to me that even back then I loved fishing. And now, from, not coincidence, but from, I think, just being led to this region, we live in a place with some of the best trout fishing in the country. And that's true. It's 15 minutes from, well, I don't know how far it is from here, actually. 20, maybe. People fly from all over the country to this region to fish here. And so I was brought to a place where we have good fishing, and 5-year-old me that had that instilled in her can now enjoy that again. And if you have never fly fished, let me just put a little plug in for our fly fishing club and or class. There's something very peaceful about it. I have called my husband leaving work crying for who knows what. Again, remember our beginning talk. And he said, well, let's go fishing. And I have cried all the way to the river, and I've cried putting on my waders. And if you think there's a more ridiculous sight than a human being crying, I mean, the waders look ridiculous. But crying and putting them on, and you walk into that river, and there's something about it that, I don't know if it's nature. I don't know if that's just because that's part of my core, but it's very relaxing, and it gets your brain knocked off that thing where it has that cycle of negative thoughts or worry or whatever else. So I thought that was interesting, but the next part was the last page, and it had all these careers, and it said, what do you want to be? And I wrote that, and that gave me chills. And I know some of you skeptics are going, well, it was 1975, you were female, so of course you said that. To you, I say, oh, but the omelet line is really short right now. I really invite you to check it out, right? But I think it has more to do with what I really feel like God has called me to do. And I feel like being a teacher is what I was given. And I think I knew it then, and I knew it now. And I didn't always, in between those 40 years, I didn't always know it. But I know it now because I get probably more out of it than I feel like I give. Most of the times I'm just entertaining myself in class. And if anybody else is along with me, great. Yes, I see some nods. Yes. But I thought that was cool. So I try to remember to stay true to that inner self and not to stifle it, not to cover it up. And there's another Buechner quote that I think reflects this. The original shimmering self gets buried so deep that most of us end up hardly living out of it at all. Instead, we live out of all the other selves, which are constantly putting on and taking off like coats and hats against the world's weather. And I think that's true. And I would invite all of you to go back through little pictures, ask your parents what you were like. Because there might be things that you're meant to do that society has told you is not viable, or society has told you that that's not what you're meant to be. And I would argue that. So, I'll stay on that for a while. That's 4 types. Meanings of the word roots. Hair, sadly. Mathematical roots. Geographic roots, and what I call inner roots. And the last is really not necessarily a type of roots, but I think it's where we're all brought together. For some reason or another, all of us are here together. And you've chosen King. And King has a responsibility to be true to its own roots, something that I think we as an institution are getting back to and concentrating on, maybe in a way that we haven't. And we want to make sure that you are getting in touch with all those parts of your roots, because you'll leave here. You will leave, well, some of you will leave here. Some of you will leave here sooner than others. Some of you will stay forever. That's okay. We like that. But we want to make sure that we don't change who we are at the core. And most of us that are faculty and staff in this room are very committed to that, even when it drives you nuts. Because being a liberal arts college sometimes is frustrating when all you want to do is learn that tiny bit of whatever it is that you think you want to do for a job. And you're forced to read, forced is a strong word. Obviously it's a delightful exercise. But you're reading something that you would not have chosen yourself. And I have seen I've seen wrestling students tweet about the fact that Brandon's story made them read something in class and they never thought that they would be able to understand and enjoy it. And now you've got a first-generation college student who's actually enjoying literature. That's liberal arts learning. You're made to take statistics or calculus or foundations of math, not foundations, semi-paper. What else do we have? Oh, cryptology, right? Maybe that's not your choice, but it forces you to think critically and to use your problem-solving skills and your sequential thinking, blah, 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 blah. But that's part of who you are, and that's part of your core, and that's going to travel with you. I meant to put this up here, but I forgot. And 93% of all of them that surveyed said they're looking for a candidate that demonstrated capacity to think critically, communicate clearly, solve complex problems, and more important, and all of that is more important than their undergraduate major. That's liberal learning, and you may find that you really love something that you didn't intend to love. And I would say go after it and explore it, and don't let people tell you that it's not a vocation or there's not money in that, because I think where you're meant to be is where you're meant to be. I did a little survey of students. I accosted students in the dining hall, in the library, on the Oval, different places. Of course, my own students were forced to have to take this survey. It's very unscientific. It is probably not significant. No, I didn't get human resource permission. But it's my speech, and I will include my data. But I wanted to know kind of a little bit about our students now. Our students now are a little bit different, and you can't read this in the back, but I'll tell you, 93% of the students admitted that they have texted in class. So at least you're connected. You're connected somewhere, right? I thought that was interesting. 63%, that's almost 2 out of every 3, wanted to ask a question in class but did not. So all of us as professors, just a reminder, was a reminder to me to maybe slow down, stop the Traynor show, and allow for some questions. But to you, dig deeper, form those roots, get into your classrooms, ask your questions. Everybody else is glad you asked the question, except for grouchy person in the back. 89% said they were worried about their future. 89% said they were worried about their future, and a lot of those students were freshmen, so that's early. And I think that's normal. I don't think it's unfortunate, but I think that's another reason why it's great that you're here, because I think this will help you hopefully find out maybe what are you meant to do. 47% thought Don Hudson was 70 years old. 47%, Don, that's less than half. I was happy about that. I thought that was, I thought that was interesting. That was just something I wanted to know for myself. Part of the group that I asked, not everybody was included in this, but it was the vast majority, performed in some capacity on this campus. So maybe it was sports or band, choir, theater, Snyder Honors students that give lectures and speeches. And so I asked them about their feelings about their professors at their events. And 87% of them indicated that it matters to them when the professors are there. 87%. And it was only that low because there was a decent number of people that said, we haven't seen any professors at our event. And, okay, to be fair, if that's swimming, it's probably because of your outfits, I'm just saying. So that's not on us, that's on you. But some of them said, we only see the professors involved in our events, things like that. So I thought that was so telling, is that it matters to you, and that made me feel great because I think that means that you have formed some roots here too, and you have connections. I think you feel a sense of family here, and so I was happy to see that. One person, you can't even see the color because it was so small down there. One person said it was creepy, but that was the only negative. Everybody else was relatively positive about that. 75% said that they are texting with their parents regularly as multiple times a day to multiple times a week. And that was a pretty large percentage. And so that tells me that your parents are very involved in your education, which is a great thing. And that means they're very involved in King. And so I just thought that was interesting. But the 89% worried about your future, listening to your calling will help take care of that. And maybe you don't know what that is, and maybe you do and you're fighting it, I don't know. And I believe that there are some things that are coincidences. But I think God is more involved than you know. And I think he's very intimately involved here at King. I know that for a fact. I never filling in because Dr. Lindemann was on sabbatical. I had no intention of staying. It was a one-year temporary assignment. I don't necessarily fit the mold of a college professor. I'm not a scholar. I don't read. I mean, again, we talked about this multiple times. I'm not proud of that. I'm not really ashamed of it, but I'm not proud of it. But that's not really how I would have described myself, so I wouldn't have chosen this path. But I saw that was a temporary need. I had some time on my hands, so I came here. And what happened was, I know God's influence, because I fell in love with King. They thought I was okay enough to offer me a position to stay, and they have not yet run me off. Although I really only have one more year of my contract, so we'll check with them. Anyway, as of now, I'll at least be here one more year. But I don't think that's an accident. I know it's where I'm supposed to be, and the reason I know it is because I have had some of the worst times of my life in the last 9 years, and I've had some of the best times of my life. And in times where I was undergoing just some troubles, some worries, and I would drive here and think, how in the world am I going to get out of that car and go teach math, or be funny, or be uplifting? And I know I'm in the right space because as soon as I get in front of students, whether it was 9 years ago or whether it's, all right, well, some of you are taking a test, so that's not really a good thing. But whether it's later on this afternoon, everything goes away. And it is like I can breathe again when I'm in front of students. Students at King. And I've taught other places, and I've not felt that anywhere else I've ever been other than King. So I don't think it's an accident. I think this place, King is my sanctuary. King is part of my family. Sometimes I want you to find that. And if you find it here, we would love to have it. And if you find it somewhere else, but I want you to look for that. And I want you to know it when you see it. And we all get mad at King. We all get frustrated. You've all heard my frustrations. Sometimes I share them. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I only share them with colleagues. But we all get mad, and there are things that are broken here, and there are things that need to get fixed. And we get it. We know it. You know it. But you can't go on any other campus and not read it. I mean, go pull up a Yik Yak when you travel, and they're all complaining about parking or wherever else. Not that I would ever go on Yik Yak. I'm just saying, articles have been written about that. So, when you leave, the part of King that I want you to keep, try not to keep the part that drives you crazy. And this time of year, if you're not like ready to go, something might be wrong with you, because you've got to be stressed and you've got to miss home. But I want you to remember things like that, the late night exam breakfast. I mean, that is like one of the happiest times on campus, right? We're crammed in there. I don't know if that's even fire code legal. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure it is. Of course it is. I don't know. We just, yeah. Everybody's happy. The tweets are happy. They're positive. Even people that 2 days ago were upset at King are saying, this is why I love this school. That's what I want you to keep with you. And we just had Dogwood. And we had a lot of alumni come back, and some of them were in your position, ready to go, tired of school, tired of this place, mad, frustrated. And they forget about that, and they come back. I said about like Canada. And they come back, and we want you to come back too, because we want you to remember things like that. DC trip, this is last year's freshman group. Some of you I can recognize in there, some of you I can't. But if you were here as a freshman, like, I want you to remember that, because that trip is fun. I've never heard anybody say that trip is a bad time. And there aren't many schools that do that, and I hope King always continues to do that, but that's what I want you to take with you. And then graduation, that's where you'll be. Remember that, remember the good times. Keep all that as part of your core. You're here, you've chosen to be here. I don't think it's an accident. I think you have things to bring, I think we have things to bring you. And my last quote from Buechner has to do, I think, with being in the right place at the right time. I believe that people laugh at coincidence as a way of relegating it to the realm of the absurd, and of therefore not having to take seriously the possibility that there's a lot more going on in our lives than we either know or care to know. And I think that's true. Who can say what it is that's going on? I suspect part of it anyway is that every once and so often from the wings that goes something like this. You've turned up in the right place at the right time. You're doing fine. Don't ever think that you've been forgotten. So that's what I want to leave you with. Thanks for coming. Appreciate it. And now we have a stats test.
She had to say something else, and she was like, oh, forget it. So in appreciation for being the faculty lecturer in the spring of 2015, here is this beautiful clock that's all yours. It actually has a battery, so we hope it works. But we are very appreciative, and like Annie, I am personally very grateful. So come and see your professors dressed up in funny robes that hurt their one place on their back. You probably don't know that anyway. And on that evening at 7 o'clock in First Pres, Marilyn Chandler McIntyre will be with us as our final Buechner speaker this spring. And I exhort you to come and also to participate in things like baccalaureate and the end of the year things that are so important to the culture here, and that really we are all privileged to be a part of. So God bless, and may God's face shine upon you.